Alright, so in this video I want to show you the for in and for of loops. So earlier in this section I explained the traditional for loops and while loops, which are basically in every programming language, at least every language that I've learned. So in this video I want to show you some of the more two of the newer kinds of loops that were added in JavaScript within the past. I'm not exactly sure how many years. I'd say 4 years or so. These loops are relatively new to JavaScript. So the first one I want to show you is the for of loop. And I'm not sure if I showed you the for each loop, because there is also this for each loop which I may not have showed you, but basically for each is actually attached to the array object. So if you have an array, you can call for each on that, and then the for each loop will it's a function. It's actually just a function. It's not like the while loop, which the for and while loop are like special things in JavaScript, whereas the for each loop is just a function that basically under the hood it just kind of does a for loop. But the for in and for of loops are, and the reason why I brought up for each loop is just because the for of loop is basically like a better for each loop. So the idea of a for each loop is it just loops over every value in an array. So you have an array and you do something like for each value in this array, do this. That's the idea. Although you could already do that with for loops. We've already seen that. Just use I and then just access the array with at the index of I. So these loops that I'm going to show you in this video don't actually add anything that you couldn't do previously. It just makes it a lot easier. Okay, so the first one is, and I actually have these things copied to my clipboard here. I'm just going to paste them in. So just this. So I got an array and an object. So right now I'm just going to use the array. So the for of loop is, it just looks like this. So you start off with for. This is kind of like a for loop actually, but a for loop you would have three things in here. You'd have like a let I equals something and yada yada yada. For a for of loop, you just say for, and you could do let name, but you don't really have to do that most of the time. So we could just say for name, and this name is going to be, it's like a variable that we're creating. We can call this whatever we want. You can call it, say, for x. I'm just going to say for name, and then of, so that's why it's called a for of loop. And then here you put the last thing, you just put the name of the array that you're going to be looping over. So we have this array called names, and I'm just going to say name of names. So for name of names, we want to do something. So we can console.log. So now inside here, the loop code, we're going to have access to this variable called name, which for each iteration of the loop, name will be the values that are in the array. So the first iteration, name will be equal to John, and then it will be equal to Jesse, and then it will be equal to whatever this is. Okay, so let's see that. Well, we could say hello plus name plus, I'm not sure if I've showed you the better syntax for concatenating strings like this, where instead of saying plus a variable plus a string again, there's a better way to do this with template strings, but I'm not sure if I've showed you that yet. This video is actually an update, so I recorded the original videos for the course a few months ago, so I'm not exactly sure exactly what I explained at this point in the course. So I'm just going to do it basic, just like this, that anybody could just understand. Okay, so hello name, and then here we could just say, see, this is kind of confusing because it's like there's a dot at the beginning, because I actually want to put a dot at the end of the name, and then a space, and then start a new sentence. So it is kind of hard to read, but it'll make sense once we see it. Okay, so let's click run, and we get these things. So, and that's basically it. The for of loop, I think I will be using for of loops later on in the course at one point, because I end up using loops so much that I usually just use the basic for loops, but then after a while I get kind of annoyed because most of the time I'm just using a for loop with the old syntax that you're used to with the I++ at the end. And if you're just looping over an array, you just want to do something for every value in the array, there's no reason to have that crazy syntax if you could just use something very simple just like this. Okay, so the next loop is a bit more interesting of a loop. It's the for in loop, and it actually looks, the syntax is almost the exact same as a for a loop. I'm not sure what's going on right here. Okay, I guess this is a syntax error because I haven't filled in anything right there. Okay, so the for in loop is, instead of looping over an array, you're looping over an object, which is a little bit different. So I got this object here, and notice that the keys here, they're in strings. And I think earlier in this section when I explained objects, I didn't use strings to show the keys, because the key would be something like I think there was like a products and like a CEO. So we would just do something like this, like CEO. And this is usually what you do for objects. But you can use strings. You can use strings, and whoops, what was that? You can use strings, and these keys have spaces in them. So if you wanted a space in your key, you have to use a string, because if you did something like if we just say and this, or I mean this is a reserved keyword. So if I say and these, just put that to be a number. This is, if I comment this out, this is going to be a syntax error for sure. Yeah, that. So, but if you put a string around it, then it's fine. So I just want to point that out. Get rid of this. Okay, so now I want to loop over every one of these values in this object. So we could do that by saying for item, and I guess I could call this building in tall buildings. So tall buildings is the name of the object. And other than that, it's basically the exact same syntax as the for of loop. Instead of using of, you say in, and here, instead of putting the name of the array, you put the name of the object, and this is just the variable that you're creating that you're going to be able to access inside this code right here, all this stuff right here. So here we could say console.log. Now actually, before I show you any I just want to show you at the most simplest that it could be. If we just put item, just console.log item, and there's still this little squiggly thing here. I'm not sure why. Item, right, item. I was still thinking I was calling it item because that's what I had prepared to call it, but it makes more sense to call it building. So, okay, so here I'm just getting the keys. So I'm not actually getting the value. So also these numbers here actually refer to the height of the building in meters, which isn't obvious right now, but that's what it is. That's why it's called tall building. Anyways, so the building is referring to the key, not the value. But in order to get the value, all you'd have to do is access tall buildings, and you could do this syntax like that, and then just put building. And whatever building is, it will access the value of that. So now when we click run, instead of getting the keys, we'll get all the values. Just like that. And then you could use this to say something like the okay, let's see if this actually works out. Let me just double check this syntax. So this is going to say something like the Burj Khalifa space is space 828 meters tall. I put meters tall. Okay, let's click this and it should work out pretty good. So yeah, there's supposed to be a space here too, although it doesn't really make a difference.